Okay, it's Sunday around 10:30 a.m. and I felt like recording another video. I had intended it to be earlier in the day, but I had chores to do and some other things, so I wasn't able to get out of the house until now. It's a beautiful day. It's around 72 degrees, which is a big improvement. Well, I should say 72 degrees and not a lot of smoke. It's a big improvement over what it was the past few days, where we were getting really hot days up to 90 degrees, and it was very smoky because the smoke from the unfortunate wildfires in Canada were blowing down into our area and causing the pollution to be hazardous, extremely unhealthy. I think it was the PM 2.5 particulate matter, I believe that's 2.5 microns or less, was in some places up to 500, which is hazardous. In our area, I think it was in the 200s, where normally I think it's about 40, 30, So it was pretty bad. You could smell it, you could see it. The sky was a bit orange. I feel for the people in Canada who are actually dealing with the immediate effects of this, losing their homes, and I mean, they're experiencing much more of the pollution than we even are. So it's really a bad situation, but we were having some somewhat unpleasant days here, and I was not able to go out walking during those days, or chose not to. I suppose I could have put a mask on, but just didn't feel like doing it. Plus I had some issues with my oldest dog having some health issues, and I was sort of taking care of her and staying closer to home. So after all that, and more of the fun day-to-day life challenges, I decided to come out today and just record some of what's happening in the mind and observe what's going on. And I think that's the best way to characterize what's happening. No particular goal in mind. I thought today that the best way to think about what I'm doing is just recording the observation of my mind. And even though this observation involves a lot of articulating and talking, which can get in the way of pure observation without words, without bringing it all in, there is a point where reason and logic and discussion make sense. And I think observing how my mind thinks as it's thinking, as it's going through this observation process, this stream of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, which is happening, and observing it happening I find it really interesting. And a lot of times when I review what gets recorded, I don't, it's almost like watching another person, because I don't, I have no plan for what I'm saying. And then whatever comes out through whatever process words are created. And it's interesting to see where it goes. Sometimes it goes in directions I wouldn't anticipate, and I like to let it do that, let the process unfold, and then observing that process, how it happened, how it started, weaving in and out of this and that, and ending up somewhere or nowhere, is really interesting. I find it interesting. So, and of course, the sort of the main purpose or goal, if there is one, is to just observe everything that's happening with the minimal verbalization as possible. You know, I'm certainly not minimizing my verbalization at the moment, but there is a difference between using words and having intent. And this is something that sort of occurred to me today as I was walking, or actually as I was getting ready, is the difference between memories, observing memories, and reacting to memories. And, you know, the brain is a recording device. It creates memories. It stores memories. You can't stop it from storing memories. Well, I suppose I can't say you can't, well, you can't. Perhaps there is a way to not record. It's not something you, as a collection of memories yourself, as a bundle of memories, can stop memory recording, but perhaps there is a way to stop recording. But that's why it's interesting to observe the brain as it's recording, how it's recording, what happens to those recordings, how they impact your future thinking or not impact your future thinking. Because that is the process that's happening, right? And you are not the controller of that process. There can be an observation of that process, not by an observer, but there can just be observation, awareness of what's happening, but not an awareness driven by any particular intent to achieve a goal. And if there is, observe that. The very, whatever is going on, and to not reject anything, right? Even if you find yourself sort of in a position where you see that there is a motive behind the thoughts, then observe that motive. Observe, there's nothing that can't be observed. It's all observable. And the only problem is when we pretend or try to turn off or change what's happening, because we're not really ever doing that. We're just compounding one thought on top of another and enriching the problem rather than seeing what's happening. So this is why it's so important to observe with no judgment, with no intent to change or to become any different. Just observe who you are. Know yourself, whatever you happen to be, not what you want to be or wish you could be, and not only those parts of you that you find, pleasurable or agreeable, also the disagreeable parts, right? The whole of you, not parts, not selectively observing. You have to see the whole, whether you like it or not. But if you start liking it or not liking it, you're affecting the observation. So this is why it's very important to have choiceless awareness, is a phrase often used to describe this sort of awareness where you are aware but not choosing. And what does it mean to be choosing? It really means that thoughts, it's like there's an echoing process of thinking, right? You observe something, and then there's just that. I observe a bench in the distance, and I can see what it is, and its shape and color, and where it's located, and how far away I am, and it has certain characteristics that are observed, which is fine. I'm observing it. I don't need to name all those things, though, and I don't need to quantify, because all those are measurements, measuring its distance, its size, its color. Basically any verbal or even nonverbal but symbolic description is using thoughts to characterize what's being observed, to categorize, limit it. Because instead of seeing that bench for what it is, that particular bench that is there, that I can observe the shadow, the light, without articulating anything about it. Because it's like once you're articulating, what you're doing is building a mental model. You're building a mental model of that you then take as reality, not the actual bench. No matter how you characterize that bench, how you measure it, you could measure it in a nearly infinite number of ways. Its design, how many pieces of, you could weigh it and determine its weight, and you could even characterize the shadows. You could create a painting of this, and capture the essence of some part of its essence that way. Only a part of it, not the actual bench. And to see, you could spend, and this takes time, right? There's time involved in all that process of characterization. I mean, creating a painting, even taking a picture, takes time. And now you have a recording of it, and you think that recording, you may look back at it later, and oh, that's the bench, but it's not the bench. It's just the image, the two-dimensional image that was captured from that, from the reality, the truth, and then converted to some form of image or memory or recording, whether it's recorded in our brain or recorded on film, in a digital medium, or even if you took a 3D holographic image. I mean, it doesn't matter how you choose to do it. Any representation of that thing is less than the thing. It's not the thing. And then any characterization through verbal discourse, through its color, shape, size, whatever, however you could write a poem about it, doesn't matter. They're all impartial representations of the true bench. And you can't capture it any other way. You can observe, and in that process of observation, which is happening continuously, like not even continuously, just is, that there is a observing of the whole of that thing and not its parts, but we limit it once we start capturing it in that way. That's the important thing to see, the limitations of how we look at the world. And it's not just the bench, it's everything. It's everything around you at every moment in time. It's the people you interact with. You have mental models of them. You have mental models that you create of everything, your life itself. When you wake up in the morning, what you're going to do, how you're going to go about the day. You have a plan of events, a sequence of events that you want to carry out, and that's going to be your day. And you may pack it full of activities. Which reminds me of, I see people on this Sedona Facebook group that, Sedona is one of my favorite places, and people plan many trips to Sedona by packing an itinerary. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to wake up 9 a.m., I'll do this, 10, I do this. I've done that. I mean, when I first went there, and, you want to get it all in. There's so much there. You want to contain the immensity of a place like Sedona in some finite set of activities that you think, if I perform these activities, hike these trails, go to these restaurants, I will capture Sedona or some part of it in my trip, and it'll be full and happy and all that. And every time I've ever done anything like that, in my own observation, it never satisfies. It's never enough. There's always something you didn't do. You left something off your itinerary. You say, okay, well, I'll come back next time. And there's a next time and a next time. Maybe you could go there every year, do something different, keep partially fulfilling yourself, never completing your fulfillment, always wanting or longing for more. And the vacation becomes like a planned activity, instead of it being maybe a vacation in the truest sense, or to free the mind of, to go to a place like Sedona or anywhere and see it as an opportunity to step away from this life of planning and organization and just endless structure that we place upon ourselves in our living, and using it as an opportunity to free yourself from that, to be free from all that. It just becomes another part of your planned and organized life, and loses whatever essence it may have in being a freeing from all that, a freedom from planning and conditioning and all that. And in my own experiences, in my own life, I have found that going without an expectation of what's even going to happen, what you're going to do, and letting things come to you naturally, waking up every day and just something, not even deciding, but just, okay, today I'm gonna hike Bell Rock, or I'm gonna go here. So you're still planning, but like it's less structured. And sometimes maybe even not doing that, just stepping outside and seeing where the wind blows you, in which direction. And I've had a lot of interesting experiences myself in places like Sedona and Ojai and other places that I find particularly interesting, just by being there and not by having a plan or a structure in place. And things happen. And it's interesting because there is a difference between things happening and planning. Things are always happening of their own accord. I mean, in walking here now and not knowing, should I go straight, turn left, right, which I don't have any idea. I decided to go this way. Not having any plan for it. It's different than if I had said I'm going to hike this particular trail, from this time period to this time period, and then time myself and make sure I go a certain pace and keep up, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. There's sort of an aimlessness to, and we don't like aimlessness. As a society, we've been conditioned to believe that our life has to be planned out and we have to be secure. Plan out where you go to school, plan your career, save money in a certain way, like to be safe and secure, and have your life sort of like planned out accordingly from here until its end. And when you think about how does anything new fit into that pattern? When you plan everything else, where's the new stuff come in? In between the plans? And I always like that expression, life is what's happening while you're making other plans. And I think that contains a lot of truth if you go into that statement, because it means it's what's happening regardless of your plans. Your plans may succeed, they may fail. You may intend to do something and it doesn't work out. And you're disappointed, because that's often what happens. Your plans never work out exactly, doesn't go according to plan, something changes. And instead of just accepting that as the way of things, it's a source of disappointment. It's like, oh, well, I'll do better next time. Next time I'll plan things even more carefully and not let that happen. So then it just becomes more achievement, and just becomes a whole nother thing. So just not doing that, and seeing where the day takes you. Like today, I don't know even. The day may take me in a particular direction. I don't know what direction it's going to take me. Just walking along with some vague notion of how things are going to go. And maybe that's still preventing me from truly living, having a vague notion of how things will go, because it's still somewhat of a plan. You could say it's a poorly constructed plan. But I had some intention of coming here today, and some intention of walking, and some idea of what I was going to talk about a little bit. Not really as much in that regard. I did want it to just sort of evolve and observe how the brain works, how it moves around. And even while I'm talking, I observe the thoughts that are occurring in the mind that are like little clouds passing by, that something I say and then it triggers a memory. And I think this is what I was, to get back to memory and what I was saying earlier, that there's a difference between remembering something and reacting to that memory. I think you can recall something may have happened to you a year, 2 years ago, yesterday, or 5 minutes ago, and the brain has recorded that sensory information almost automatically. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to not have that process occur unless you're medicated or anesthetized or whatever, which is possible because it is a physical process that can be interrupted. But while that process is occurring in our waking normal life, there is a recording of what's happening under normal circumstances. So let's just say, so we have a memory, I have a memory of coming here, a memory of my car and where it's parked, and a memory of, a lot of things. But what happens when you recall a memory often is you either want that thing to happen again, you don't like it, you start judging it, you start analyzing, right? More thoughts start spilling from that memory. The memory triggers a chain of thoughts, and then that chain of thoughts goes in some direction. Oh, I wish yesterday I wanted this thing to happen and it didn't happen, and now I'm remembering that situation and wishing it had gone differently, and wishing this had happened or that had not happened. Or you start thinking about the future. Well, next time I go there, I will make sure that I do this differently in order to achieve my goal. Like, just to see that that's often what you're doing when you're thinking, is you're wanting something or not wanting something. There's this underlying desire or fear, you could say. There's two separate sort of ways of it, and they're not entirely separate because they're very similar in that they're reactions, reward and punishment. You could also say they're consequences of reward and punishment, that there's something I liked, it was pleasant, and I want to repeat that again, repeat that past experience or whatever. But it requires a memory, right? That it requires a memory, but a memory is not like, it's like if and only if in mathematics. There's a memory, but then there's also a chain of thoughts around that memory. But there could just be the memory without the propagating chain of thoughts. Oh, I remember what happened yesterday. You could describe it and leave it at that. It's like a description of what happened, the facts, this thing happened, that happened, and that's to be expected. But it's when you start seeing yourself twisting and transforming and adding to that and saying, yeah, that's right, that person said that thing to me and it really annoyed me, and next time I see that person, I'm gonna respond to them. I'll get back at them for what they said, or I'll plan something out. You see, that's what's happening. It's like a trigger for more that doesn't need to come into play. All that additional thinking triggered by that memory, reacting to that memory, it's a response. That's why thinking is a reaction to memory, because it takes something like a seed or a memory, something for it to propagate from, but then it propagates like a chain, never-ending chain of reactions, and then reactions to those reactions. And that's how the thoughts occur. One thought, then the next thought, then the next thought, and it just, it's like a chain of events that occur, going back to that recall of memory, which is often triggered by some new sensory experience. So you may have come to the park yesterday, which I did come, well, I didn't yesterday, but come to this park, and then today you're at the park and you see something that you saw yesterday and it reminds you of what happened yesterday. So now that memory is in your present awareness, and then you could take off from there and just start going down a spiraling path of thoughts triggered from that memory. But what if that didn't happen? And I think this is the silence of the mind is not that there is nothing in the mind. It's that reaction process, that continuous reacting to memories, isn't occurring. The reaction and reaction to that and reaction to that, which is our normal daily activity, is just a continuous reaction to what we're either seeing now in real time or memories that we may have. You can react to either of those, and they're related. What I'm seeing now triggers parts of the brain to activate based on association or similarity or whatever process that is, and then there's all sorts of connections and interconnections to that trigger other reactions, and it's a chain reaction of events occurring in the brain as a result of this continuous stream of sensory input and reaction to the sensory input. So the interesting question to ask is, can there be sensory input? Can there be an awareness of what's happening now without an awareness of the memory, which is the past and gone? So not be aware of the memories. The memories may be there, but you don't have to be aware of that memory. Be aware of what's happening now, because what's happening now is always happening. There's always a now. And it's not that the now is being recreated, it's the now is all there is, in fact. And we have this illusion of past and future, but there is only now. And we lose that now, that awareness of the now, when the mind is taken off of the now, what's currently happening, and is triggered or follows whatever train of thoughts or thinking is occurring as a result of what you're seeing. The wanting of what you're seeing, the not wanting of what you're seeing, the recognition, the memories associated with what you're seeing, the past, all that past conditioning, and all that comes into play, and it's almost automatic. And it is automatic in a lot of ways, right? There is no control over any of this. It can only be observed. And this is so fundamental, because most of our life, for those that recognize that these things are happening, you say, oh, I wish I didn't do that. I wish I didn't constantly think about the past. Or you may have anxiety, which is sort of a thinking, constant thinking about everything. Whatever's happening, what could happen, and formulation of future scenarios and past scenarios, and it's maybe an overactive mind, but it's no different than what's happening to everybody all the time. Maybe just the intensity level is higher, but it's still a reaction to memory, a reaction to fears and all that. It's all the same. It's just a matter of intensity. And so when that's happening, to be just aware that that's happening and not try to stop it, because who's going to stop it? Who is the stopper? More thoughts, more thinking? It's why it's also important to see who you are, because when you see that you are those memories, if you took those memories away, who would you be? Took away every memory that you have, what would be your conception of yourself? You wouldn't have it. It just wouldn't be there. And it's not like there's even a container that contains memories. There's no even container. It's like that, if we say we lost my memory, who's the my that lost the memory? The my is memory. So the removal of memory is the removal of you. You are those memories. That's also what's so important to see, because it takes away this significance that you have, this belief that you have that you are separate from these memories, that you are separate from the things that are happening, that you're somehow a separate controller, a separate even observer. Because this is why when one observes, you can't observe with the idea that there is an observer that is observing. Who is that observer that is observing? Or is there just observing? Is it just awareness? You can't identify an entity that is doing the observing. There is just observing that is occurring. It's when you interpret it through the past, then you have this impression, because the past, there's a lot of that past in the brain. There's a lot of that stored to process and analyze and judge and have an opinion about what's happening to you now. And if you see that that process is just more of the same process, it's not a separate thing, that you are not a separate thing, you are that process to whatever extent you think you are. And you just, if you observe and don't break that observing of that whole process, then the process of you observing becomes known. You know, that you see, observe that whole process of thought, the nature and structure of thought, the nature and process of thought, that it's occurring. And then it's just, there's nothing to pin yourself down. It's all just happening, you know, and it's not you doing it. So you don't need to feel guilty about anything, because you are that thing. Are those actions and activities that you may want to feel guilty about. It's all you. And there's not a you and a separate from you. So there's not a you that can be improved. There's not a you that is becoming. There's just an accumulation of memories, one on top of the other, always occurring. So there's no improvement of the past memories. Past memories are there. They're just there. All of what you are now is there in the brain in the form of memories, and anything new that comes in is just adding to the old, not changing the old. And this is why this becoming process that we have to just, it's not that we don't do that becoming, that there is no becoming. That's the awareness, isn't it? Is all this self-help and all this, I want to be better, I wish I was a better person, is like, okay, well, how do you intend to become a better person? By fighting the past that's there, that is unremovable? There's no removing the past. It's there. So violence, if you're a violent person, it's there. There's no, I want to practice nonviolence in order to remove the violent conditioning in me. It's not going anywhere. And when you deny that, you just are denying who you are and what is real. That these parts of you that cause violence, that when you observe what makes me violent, what makes me angry, why is there anger? It's better to say, instead of saying what makes me angry, because again, there's a separation then between you and that anger. It's, why does anger arise? Why does violence arise? Not to judge it, not to say I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't be. Why? How can you say that? Maybe you should be angry, maybe you shouldn't. Who's doing the deciding? Just more thoughts in your brain that could be wrong, and they're not incomplete. So rather than do any of that, observe the anger, the violence, the desire, the thinking that is occurring, regardless of what it is. You don't have to name it. The naming also belies the ever-changing nature of reality. That there may be an experiencing of something, some feeling or sensation, that there's a recognition of as anger or desire. Now it's after the fact though. While the experience is occurring, while the feeling, whatever's happening, that is anew. That's never happened before. That experience or feeling is new. But instead of seeing it as new, you now relate it to something in your memory, which is anger or violence. What if you don't name it? You don't call it anything. It's simply what's happening. It's not anger or fear or all that, because those are words that we have given to categories, to similarities of sensation or thought, that we label what's occurring in one of those ways. What if there's no labeling? Then there is no anger, there is no violence, you're not deciding that it is or isn't anything. You're just simply observing what's happening, regardless of what it is. And to be aware of that in that pure way, without disrupting it and changing it and making it try to be something, or being sad that it is something and you don't want it to be that way, it doesn't matter. It's like there's no observation. And then you may say, well, but I feel guilty because I shouldn't be that way, and I need to figure out how to change myself, how to eliminate those parts of myself that I don't like. Again, that some thought has decided is not appropriate, not right, and you want to be some other way. You have some ideal in your mind. Maybe you have the ideal of the Buddha or Jesus or Krishna or whoever it is that you wish you were. I wish I was that ideal person, which is likely not ever existed. Whatever ideal you have about the Buddha or Jesus, I mean, just think of that for a while, that you have these ideas about who these people were, which may have never been who they actually were. Because again, that word, that conception, we talked about this earlier, the bench, and no matter how many dimensions or how many ways in which you try to describe that bench, your description is not the actual thing of the bench. The explanation is not what it is. And so these people that lived, the Buddha, Jesus, assuming they did live, we don't know, but they may have, and Krishna, we don't know. Maybe they existed, maybe they didn't. How do we know anything about them? Only through words, only through what has been written down. No one's alive today that knew those people. And you could say, well, there's people that knew the people that he was alive. Well, that's sure enough. And then there's people that knew them and people that knew them. Well, how many generations have there been since these people have been here to now? And what has been passed on? I mean, you can do a little experiment. This is often done in grade school, where somebody whispers something to one person in the back of the class, and then they have to whisper it to every person next to them, and it moves up and up and up and up, and then you move through all the people in the class, and then the very last person, they compare what that person thinks happened or was said to what the first person thinks, and often it's totally different. It's the exact opposite, or it's not the same. It's like, and what that shows is the retelling of something is always prone to error. Writing things down is always subject to error, and even if it's not in error, the interpretation of those words, because words can have different interpretations. So there could be something true that's written down, and then it's not true anymore, because it's not the truth anymore. It's a bunch of words that maybe came from truth, but they are not truth, and you can't go backwards. From the words, find truth. Truth can use words, but words are not the truth. It's sort of a one-way street. And so when you rely on that, you rely on those words to find the truth, whether those words are, you think the Bible is the truth. The Bible is not the truth. No book is truth. That is just a wisdom to see. It's not. And it's the mistaken belief that it is that causes all these problems. Because if we just understood that, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that Jesus didn't exist or the Buddha didn't exist. They may have very well existed. You just don't know really who they were, and you never will. And you can try to uncover whatever history you think, it will never be complete. I mean, I've watched people, there's actually a man named James Tabor that for a while, he writes a number of interesting books about the earliest Christianity, Jesus, and his view is very different than the view that I received during my Catholic upbringing in school, and a lot of it was almost the opposite or contradiction of what I was told. So then who's right? Do I believe what I was told in a school growing up, or do I believe what this historian has said, who is also working with partial and incomplete knowledge and may not have the whole truth accessible? Well, does not have, in no way have the full truth. It's a fact. So the historian is just as wrong as the person of faith who just believes what they're told. It's like that whole thing just needs to end. Don't search for truth in any book. Read the book of yourself. You are the history of mankind. You are the living history. You are the living embodiment of anything that may be talked about or discussed. And you don't need any book. Like, that's the first thing. Get rid of that. Just cast it aside. You don't need to reject it. You don't need to actively reject. Just leave it aside and say, it doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I don't care about that. It can't be the truth. The simple recognition that it can't be the truth, that it's only partial and incomplete and never will be the truth, is all you need to see. Because then it just ends. You don't care about that anymore. It's not, you just let it go. It's not rejecting, not accepting. It's just a dropping, a laying down. It's like a weight that you carry, that you lay down and say, it's not there. And it doesn't matter how much you want it to be. It doesn't change what's actually true. So to see, that's the first thing, right? You have to begin there. Because if you still hold on to any beliefs, anything that comes from the past knowledge, then you can't be free to see what really is. And even if you think you cast it aside, but hold on to it, then everything you do gets filtered through that. So you may say, oh, that sounds similar to what Jesus said in Matthew, whatever, right? Which he didn't say, because somebody wrote it down. And even the Gospels themselves differ, and they don't say exactly the same thing, and sometimes they agree somewhat, and sometimes they don't. And so people try to find truth that way, where they agree, where they disagree. It's an endless game. You can play it forever, and biblical historians will play that game. That's their job. That's what they're paid to do. But it's not where you're going to find truth. And you'll never know exactly what the Buddha did, what Jesus did, what Krishna did, or anyone else for that matter. You just won't know it. Why do you care to know it? There's the other essential question. Why do you need that? Why do you need someone to tell you what to do? Why do you need someone to tell you what the truth is, when you can observe for yourself? You are now living. You are alive and capable of observing for yourself, for your own. And even these other people, whoever they may have been, observed things directly for themselves. They didn't rely on another person's interpretation. What may have made them great is their capability, their ability to do what we're saying now, which is to drop the past, their own past. The Buddha, the story of the Buddha, even that we understand, whether it's true or not, involves him going down all these paths of asceticism. He studied with all the teachers of yoga and mysticism and probably all the meditations. I mean, he did it all and found it just wasn't satisfactory. He hadn't found the ultimate truth by repeating anything anyone had told him, no matter how many things he did, because they all came from another person telling him something. Do this, do that, believe this, believe that. And the beauty of the story of the Buddha, if you really understand the story of the Buddha, is that he cast all that away. He sat down under the Bodhi tree. He said, let my body decay this and rot, and I don't care. I will not move from this spot until I have obtained the ultimate wisdom by himself, right? By his own observation of the demons in his mind, right? And Mara came to him and all the tempted him in many ways. And, the story is interesting. But again, it's a story, and there's no telling that story is true. But even if you just look at the story itself, what is the story telling us? That we cannot rely on anyone else, even the Buddha who relied on everybody. He was a great student, right? He was a prince. He was physically fit. He knew the martial arts. He came from a kingdom that he walked away from. and went on his own and tried everything, starving himself to death. And even one of the key stories of the Buddha is that he discovered the middle way, which is not the path of asceticism where you starve yourself to death or torture yourself or stand on your head for 100 days or whatever you may decide to do, thinking that is going to lead you to truth. And it's also not the life of excess, which is the normal life that everyone lives, where they just live their life without any consideration, without any introspection, without any observation of what's happening. They just exist, persist, and find ways to satisfy their desires and all that. Like, those are the extremes. So the middle way that he advocated for, and again, I don't want to advocate for that here, but even if you just say it's really to have intelligence to decide on your own, or not your own, the intelligence decides your actions, not you deciding, not you deciding you need to starve yourself, not you deciding that you need to indulge in these things, which is all the product of our thoughts or thinking. It is to let the middle way, which could be seen as the way of intelligence, to discern the right and wrong thing to do in every moment, not through any set of laws or ideas or beliefs or meditations or any of that. And so it's something that must occur within you, not from without. No one can tell you it. It's not a belief. It is something that happens perhaps to you when you are in a state of freedom from all of what everyone has tried to tell you was the truth before, to cast off all those notions and ideas of what's true, and then to be open and to receive whatever may come. Not to have any idea of what may come, not to have an anticipation of what, or someone told you. So it's the casting off of all of that, and then to be open. And not to be open in any way that someone has told you to be open, because the more that you go back and, okay, well, then I need to do this, or I need to meditate to become silent, or sit still, very still, and these things all may happen, but not if you follow a procedure to achieve anything. You simply are back in the world of conditioning. So freedom has to be freedom from all of that, from the past, from what everyone has told you, to observe what's happening in this moment without any interpretation, without any judging, no opinions, no descriptions, because the description is not the described. And then to just see what happens in that state of pure observation, and not then to anticipate what's going to happen, because this is the cleverness, right, of the whole thing, is that you can trick yourself into believing that that's what you're doing, but you're still wanting something. You're wanting an outcome. You're wanting peace. You're wanting freedom from all your anxieties or depressions. And that's not what we're saying. You be aware of all your anxieties and depressions. They are there. They are you. Be aware of what's happening to you, like it or not like it, and to have no liking or disliking. Because it's not also to say, well, I'm aware of that thing, I don't like it, but I have to accept it. That's also a process of thought, that process of acceptance of something, because you're still categorizing it. You're still labeling it. You're fighting against it. Even if you're accepting something, that's, okay, you don't want to, but you're accepting it. It's still the same thing. And it's just because there's no pattern of thought that's going to get you there. There is no pattern of thought. And it doesn't matter if you give it a pattern of thought. It becomes just the new thing that you're doing. And you may cast away everything that is old, all the old traditions, old religions, and just invent your new one. And if you do that, you have not broken out. It's the same. You're repeating the mistakes of the past that led to all these different religious traditions. Of course, people have cast away the old traditions to create their new traditions. If you create a new tradition, no matter how small that tradition might be, even just your own way of life, you may come up with a rule that you think, these are my rules of living. And you treat those rules as, which come from thought, as your way of living. I'll live according to these rules. You've just created a new religion. Don't do that. Because that very activity of trying to corner your life into some system or process, no matter what system that is, whether it's a new system you just created or an old system, it's the system that is destroying you. The system itself, not you need to find the perfect system. It's no system. To live every moment with intelligence that determines your actions, not based on a set of rules, but on an intelligence of the moment. You know, there is an intelligence that comes from thought, which is what's measured in IQ tests, and, you know, it's really skill-based intelligence, the ability to solve math problems or to understand geometrical shapes or comprehend language, or however you want to look at it. Those are skills. And in measuring intelligence in that way, that's not true intelligence. That there is a true intelligence which is not based on thought. An intelligence that you may say is all around us in nature, but you can't pin it down like that, because then you'll start conceptualizing it. But there's an intelligence every living being knows, like the body has intelligence, has its own natural intelligence. It knows what to do. I mean, your heart and liver and all the parts of your body are functioning now, not according to your thoughts. You're not telling the parts of your body how to operate. They are operating in an intelligent way. Life has a way of overcoming the disorder of the universe, the entropy of the universe, right? Life is a form of pattern that arises that without intelligence or order would not exist, right? You can think of disorder as sort of the opposite of intelligence. The complete disorder, complete randomness, complete chaos, right? The Greek word even itself, chaos and order, represent these activities, right? And life is an interplay of between chaos and order. And pure chaos is pure randomness, there's no structure, but order is not something that can be pinned down as easily as perhaps disorder. You know, we can see the disorder in our life very easily, but it's harder for us to see what the right way of living is, the orderly way, we may say. And we're tempted to come up with rules for that orderly way of living. And that's essentially it, right? Take your pick at which culture, which religion, which book, which set, like many people have attempted through thought to determine the right way to live and to write that down into a set of ethics or morality. And we say, cast that away, all systems of ethics and morality. Cast them all away. There is none, because they are all products of thought. What is their common factor? They all came from a person thinking. The impartial thought process, regardless of where they came from, it is incomplete. It is not what is happening now. It is not applicable to what's happening now. Life is ever changing, constantly evolving, transforming itself, and becoming things that have nothing to do with these thought patterns. And what rule you may develop even 2,000 years ago, that rule may not apply now. Well, it doesn't apply. Right? Rules of ethics, and whether it's the 10 Commandments or the Golden Rule or whatever, these are all rules. Why do you need a rule to live by? Why do you need any rule? Even the Golden Rule. Because it is what happens when you live a life of disorder and you're trying to correct that disorder through a rule of order. So you live a disorderly life. And let's just take the Golden Rule, which, treat others as you would want to be treated. Seems very reasonable. So why don't you do it? And you know you don't do it. That your life is filled with many examples of selfishness and self-centeredness, and where you decide you're more important than the other person, and you're not really being compassionate. You're not truly living the Golden Rule, despite the fact that you know the Golden Rule. Why is that? because the golden rule is not truth. It is a partial representation. It may sound nice, sounds great. So how does it change your life? Does it change your life? And it can't change your life by itself. It's a set of words. Those words may elicit a reaction or some understanding like of truth and say, yes, I see truth in those words. But if you really saw the truth in those words, you would live it, not speak about it. It becomes your life. And not because you took those words and said, I will live by the golden rule. It's just that when you observe life, the golden rule arises naturally. When you have compassion and love, when there is love and compassion, then there's no need of rules. There's no need of a golden rule. That's a thought pattern. It's like, it may be what someone that doesn't understand truth, when they observe, say, one who does understand truth and love, and they describe it, and they say, well, it's like that. That rule resembles what I'm seeing, that there's compassionate for everyone, right? So instead of just being compassionate for yourself, they're compassionate for everyone. So that's like treating others like yourself. But that's not the source or origin. It's not as if that golden rule caused that person to live that way. Love and compassion, in its truest sense, is how that person is living, and it's only when it's described does someone then break it down into rules. Whether it's, the 10 Commandments, rules to live by. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not, covet thy neighbor's wife, or thou shalt not lie, or whatever, bear false witness. Okay, does anyone really live by those rules? So what's interesting is you have all these rules. Would everyone that practices that religion say, I follow those rules religiously all the time? Even the fact that there is confession, right, in Catholicism is that you don't live according to the rules that say you should, in quotes, live by. The rules that somebody gave you and said, live by these rules, this is what Jesus said to do. And everyone's heard, if you're raised in Catholicism, you've read the Bible, you've heard what Jesus said, but you don't live by it. Why? Why is that? And it's amazing that the pretzel, you can twist yourself up all because we all have original sin. And so therefore we're all flawed. And so it's okay to be flawed. We just have to apologize every time we commit a sin. Go to confession, commit whatever sins you want, then go to confession, confess your sins, and you're somehow purified, until the next time? Like, you have to regularly go to confession because you're regularly sinning. You're continuing to commit those sins. Why is that? Is it an escape then? That when you go to confess, you feel like what? You're cleansing your soul, so now you can go to heaven. You did bad things, but it's okay because I went to confession. Now I can go do bad things again, and as long as I go to confession. That always never made sense to me either. It's like, just be good to begin with. I don't understand. If you need to confess things, then something's wrong. You have not truly found truth or love or compassion. You've seen that you're doing evil things and continuing to do those things, and feel that you still want to get into heaven or whatever. That's your desire, which again is just an earthly desire, to be in a place of peace where there's no pain, to be away from that. And so you feel like your penance, right? And your penance, there you go, 10 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers. Say these things, it's a magic recipe, and somehow your soul will be cleansed. I mean, it's actually ridiculous. And I'm sorry to say that, and if people are offended, but it is actually ridiculous to think that you behave how you want, be whatever horrible person you want, go to confession, tell a priest what is wrong, be told to say some words, and somehow you're going to come away from it, what, a better person? You're not going to go sin the next time? It creates guilt, right? But you continue to do those things. It's not the way. It's not right. But people do it because they are afraid of dying. They want to go to heaven, a peaceful place. They want to know that there's a continuation of who they are. Rather than knowing who they are, just observe who you actually are. Observe that. See the truth of it all. But instead of seeing the truth of it all, you build an imaginary system of belief that lets you live, but still in pain every day. You're still in anguish and pain every day. You haven't solved those problems because you don't know the origin of those problems. But you're afraid of dying and going to hell, not going to heaven. So you believe if you just are good and follow the rules that God has told you to do, you will somehow go to heaven anyways, even though you're corrupt and evil? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That if you really believed it, you would change your life. And you would not do those things that you're confessing. And the very fact that you're still doing those shows it's not working. It hasn't fixed you. You're not that person you wish you were. So it's just wrong, right? Empirically, you can observe the thing as being wrong, not right. All these flaws, all the things we've mentioned. And so then you may observe that, become frustrated, and say, okay, now I need to become a Buddhist because I see the flaws in, say, Christianity, so I'm going to pick up another system. This one's probably right. Well, you're also going down another path of thought that perhaps there was some origin, some truth. Who knows? I don't know. I wasn't around 2,600 years ago. I don't know. So you're just going to trust that somehow these rules were passed down from the Buddha, different rules. Now it's Eightfold Path or, Tibetan meditation, mantras, whatever it is. There's a new system. You've traded one system for another system, thinking that system is better. Even though, like, the truth of even the Buddha or truth of Jesus, I mean, if you get down to it, Jesus talked about love and finding true love. And Buddha also talked about love and finding love. And their disciples, who knows what they've done to their purest messages. But the commonality is love, right? Not a system of rules or, commandments that you must follow. So then the real question would be, what is love? Let's get into that, right? And who do you need to explain that to you? So it's like, if it's all about love and then what is love and compassion? Because if you had those things, or if those things arose, you would have no need for any system, any belief system, any religion, any creation of human thought. It just wouldn't be necessary. So the better thing to do is to say, let me explore what that means in my own life. Not what someone's telling me to do, but explore what that means. What is love? What is compassion? What is not love? What is not compassion? And observe those things in your life and say, is this love? Was that a loving thing that I did? Or is it an example of not love? And by seeing what is not love, what is not compassion, seeing those things that are disorderly in our lives, order may arise. And just the seeing of that, not the prescription of a particular system or a particular method to arrive at a destination, but an understanding of who we actually are. What is it about us that we don't like? What is it that is happening to truly transform consciousness? So there isn't a constant sinning and confession cycle. Sin, confess, sin, confess, sin, confess, which sounds just absurd to me. How about you get at the root of it all? So there is no sinning. But again, without the classification of something being a sin, right? Just the awareness of who you are in all your wholeness and glory, and that alone, the truth about yourself, about who you are, may set you free. Not the words of another. The truth of another is a lie, because it is simply expressed in words which are never true. So, there you go. And I think this is the observation of this, right? To go into this, to use words to an extent, to the extent that we use them today, to examine our life, and then to find perhaps the contradictions in those words, the flaws of those words, the limitations of those words. And in the using of words, perhaps that is the way to go, is to see that by using those words, we're no closer to truth. We've just used a bunch of words. It hasn't led us anywhere, and it never will. And no particular words will. It's simply the recognition, not through words, but through observation and awareness of the limitations of those words, all belief systems, so that they fall away. And then what are you left with? But you also have to understand fear, because you're very often left with fear at that point. Fear that you haven't found the truth, but you still may need to go searching for it. Okay, maybe every religion I've heard of so far is wrong, but there's another one out there that I need to find. Or cast them all away and become an agnostic, or cast them all away and base my living on science. As if morals and ethics can arise from science. Right? Now, I will live a life of scientific coldness, which is also not the solution. It's just as bad. And I see it seems to be the two sides that are at war with each other these days, right? You have those that believe in something, some religious tradition, whether of the past or of their own creation. New Age, right? You could create your own system. Or those that cast away all belief systems and say science is the answer. The pursuit of science is my noble way. And science is about observing the world and, and what? Doing what with it? It's always, there's a goal to science. It's a thirst for knowledge. It's a quest for always acquiring more and more and more knowledge, and often for the purpose of doing something with that knowledge that may not be beneficial, like building weapons of war, or communication systems that cause people to more easily insult each other through social media, or cause people to commit suicide. There's no morality in science and technology. There's no goodness. There's no, and this is the other problem, because if you go that path where you say goodness and right and wrong, those are made up concepts, imaginary, throw it all away, which sounds very similar to what I was saying earlier, but it's actually not. Casting it all away and then adhering to a pragmatic, science-based way of living. Okay, well, what does that mean? Science. How is science going to help you live a good life? Well, it's based in fact and not in fantasy. Okay. You could say that to a certain extent. There is fact and, observation. Science is not without, though, its biases. You have scientists that disagree with each other, scientists that have egos, that publish papers for the purpose of making themselves look good, not for the benefit of society. So even within science, you can see examples of egotism, of the self, the same problems that are there in religions are there in science as a field of study. There are elements of science that help us understand technology, right? How to build things better. But there's no denying that the technology we build is used for both good and evil purposes, if you want to think of it that way. It may lead to medicine, better medicines. It may lead to communication. It may lead to things that we may say are good things. It also leads to biological weapons, nuclear weapons, polluting our environment, the very earth that we live in. All those things are a result of science as well. So you don't get lost in this idea that accumulating knowledge about the world is the solution. It is not, because knowledge and that process of accumulation is partial and incomplete, not holistic, not loving and compassionate. You don't find love and compassion in science. And you may say, well, let's discard that altogether. Discard love and compassion. I don't care about the made-up words. Well, that's a very dangerous thing. Because rather than saying there is no love, there is no compassion, there is no purpose, right? A nihilistic perspective. Nothing matters. I can do whatever I want. I can behave how I want. That's also an egoistic based approach to living. that comes from your idea that there is no purpose and no meaning and no love and compassion. So it's just another idea that led you to that conclusion, the idea that there is no meaning. Rather than say there is meaning, or say there isn't meaning, or say there is good and not good, observe what there actually is. The truth is there to be observed, whether there is goodness, or there is something sacred, or there isn't. But you're never going to know by taking someone's word for it, or by rejecting it all. You will only know by observing for yourself. Don't reject the idea of, you may reject all the notions of, say, God, but then the natural question is there God different from all notions of it? So throw away all the ideas of, say, God, truth, or reality, call it what you want. You could use those words interchangeably depending on what you think. The ultimate truth, universal mind, whatever. Those are all ideas. So what you really want to do is throw the ideas out. Don't use any of those ideas, but still say, what is there? Is there something sacred? Is there something immeasurable and immense? Observe that. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. You don't know. So rather than rejecting something or accepting it as is, just observe what is. There is nothing more than what is. So by observing what is, you will find the truth. Or truth will find you. Maybe the better way of putting it. All right, I think I've gone on long enough here. It's a beautiful day, and I don't want to waste it all talking. But hopefully this has some significance or meaning, or not. It is what it is. I guess it doesn't matter to me either way. There's an observation that's occurring that is very useful. So, most importantly, get out, enjoy the day, have dialogues with others on this or other topics. Go deeply. Don't stay at the superficial levels, because that's where most people are, and they don't ask questions. It's very important to ask questions and to go into those questions. It's less important to arrive at the answers, because the answers are a stopping of the questioning process of inquiry. Inquiry, to be inquisitive, to wonder, to ask, is an energy that is very important. But the energy of conclusion, coming to a conclusion, thinking you know the answer, is almost a process of knowledge. Knowledge interferes with inquiry. And is there a pure state of inquiry that doesn't end in a conclusion, that doesn't end in knowledge, end in a set of rules, end in a belief system, and just inquiry itself, a constant, continuous inquiry into all of these questions without reaching conclusions? That's a question to ask. All right, so that is it for today. And I will see you next time.